Introduction. Friends, welcome to another exciting and fun-filled video, where we dive deep into the world of movies that are not just entertaining, but have left a lasting impact on fans across generations. And today's film is a perfect example of that. If you're someone who enjoys science fiction with a twist, if you love the idea of space battles, galaxy-wide missions, evil empires, heroic rescues, but with a healthy dose of absurdity, hilarious one-liners, and ridiculous characters, then you're absolutely going to enjoy what we have in store today. Because today, we're talking about Spaceballs, the cult classic comedy from 1987, directed by none other than the legendary Mel Brooks. If you're new to our channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because we've got a lot more fun content like this coming your way. Now let's talk about Spaceballs. This isn't your typical space adventure. This is a wild, hilarious, and brilliantly stupid parody of the sci-fi genre, particularly poking fun at Star Wars, but also squeezing in nods to Star Trek, Alien, Planet of the Apes, and a whole lot of 80s pop culture. From its wacky characters to its outrageous storyline, this movie took everything we thought we knew about space epics and flipped it upside down for laughs. In today's video, we're going to explore everything about this film. What's the story? Who are the characters? Where can you watch it now? What went on behind the scenes during its production? And what's the legacy of this movie today? All of that is coming your way. First, we'll begin with the basics. What exactly Spaceballs is about? Without giving away too much, I'll tell you that the movie follows Lone Star, a sort of spacefaring cowboy rogue who teams up with his half-man, half-dog co-pilot Barf to rescue Princess Vespa from the evil Lord Dark Helmet, who serves the villainous President Scroob of the planet Spaceball. It's a ridiculous journey through a galaxy that makes absolutely no sense, and that's the beauty of it. Every scene is packed with puns, slapstick humor, visual gags, and dialogue that will have you laughing no matter how many times you've seen it. But of course, no great movie happens without an amazing cast and crew. We'll dive into the performances that made this film iconic. Bill Pullman as the charmingly clueless Lone Star. John Candy as Barf, who steals almost every scene he's in. Daphne Zuniga as the snobbish but secretly brave Princess Vespa. Rick Moranis as the unforgettable Lord Dark Helmet, one of the funniest sci-fi villains of all time. And Mel Brooks himself, playing not just one, but two characters, President Scroob and the Wise Yogurt, a parody of Yoda, who introduces us to the Schwartz, the film's take on the Force. Each actor brings something so ridiculous and perfect to their role that it's impossible not to fall in love with this oddball team. Next up, we're going to talk about where you can watch Spaceballs today. Is it available on streaming platforms? Can you find it on Blu-ray or digital rental? Maybe it's running on a satellite movie channel? I'll give you all the information you need to easily track it down and enjoy it in all its satirical glory. And believe me, this is the kind of movie you want to watch on a cozy night with friends, with snacks and a good sense of humor. Because the fun only multiplies when you're watching it with company who appreciates its insane charm. Now let's talk about the production. How did Mel Brooks come up with such a bizarre concept? What were the challenges of making a spoof that had to reference so many iconic science fiction films? We'll look into the pre-production phase, how the script evolved, how the characters were cast, and what inspired the quirky design of the costumes and spaceships. Did you know that the giant ship in the opening sequence is intentionally absurdly long, just to drag out the joke? And yes, we'll also go into how the film was shot, the sets used, how the visual effects were created, and how practical effects played a big role in bringing this universe to life. The post-production team also deserves credit, especially for editing that helped maintain the rapid comedic timing and the musical score that parodies classic adventure soundtracks while adding its own fun flavor. And of course, the money talk. How much did Spaceballs cost to make, and how did it do at the box office? While it wasn't a blockbuster by 80s standards, it definitely earned back its budget and then some. But the real win was in the long-term fan following it built. This film slowly grew into a cult classic, thanks to home video, cable reruns, and die-hard fans quoting its lines at every opportunity. "May the Schwartz be with you" became a catchphrase that even people who haven't seen the movie recognize. As we continue, I'll also share some of the most fascinating behind-the-scenes facts. For instance, did you know that George Lucas actually gave Mel Brooks his blessing to parody Star Wars, with one important condition? He asked that no merchandise be made, especially no action figures that looked like his characters. So the movie even pokes fun at that, by having a scene that mocks over-the-top merchandising. We'll also talk about the humor style, why it works, how it mixes physical comedy with wordplay, and why it still holds up all these years later. By the end of this video, you'll not only know everything about Spaceballs, but you might find yourself re-watching it or even introducing it to someone new. Whether you're already a fan or just curious about this bizarre space spoof, stick with us till the end, because we're going to explore every aspect that made this movie one of the funniest and most unique parodies ever made. So grab your space helmets, hop into your flying Winnebago, and let's get ready to warp through the galaxy of laughter that is Spaceballs. Let's start the video. Plot and narrative. The story of Spaceballs begins in the grand tradition of space operas. A princess on the run, an evil empire on her tail, and a pair of unlikely heroes who get dragged into a galactic rescue mission. But right from the very first frame, the movie signals that it's playing by its own rules. The opening shot, a spaceship that stretches across the screen for what feels like minutes, is a visual joke that tells you exactly what kind of film you're in for. This isn't a drama. It's not even a straightforward parody. This is a universe where the plot matters only as much as it serves the next gag. And yet, beneath the layers of spoof and satire, the movie does follow a surprisingly sturdy three-act structure. Just one that's filled with Schwartz, merchandising jokes, and yogurt puns. The narrative begins with Princess Vespa fleeing her own royal wedding on the planet Druidia. She's not interested in marrying the dull Prince Valium. Yes, really. And she escapes in her personal spaceship, accompanied by her robotic companion, Matrix. At the same time, planet Spaceball, an industrial dystopia that's completely run out of clean air, is plotting to steal Druidia's atmosphere using a giant robotic vacuum in space. President Scrub, a sleazy and idiotic ruler, sends his henchman Lord Dark Helmet to capture Vespa and use her to extort the access code to Druidia's planetary shield. Enter Lone Star, a scrappy mercenary with a mysterious past, and his half-man, half-dog co-pilot Barf. They're broke and desperate for money, so when King Roland of Druidia offers them a reward to rescue his daughter, they blast off in their flying Winnebago to intercept the Spaceballs. This kicks off the film's central adventure, a journey that's part rescue mission, part space chase, and part comedy showcase. What's so delightful about the plot is how it simultaneously leans into and makes fun of the tropes of epic storytelling. The damsel in distress, the reluctant hero, the wise mentor, the dark villain with a helmet too big for his head. It's all there, only exaggerated to absurd levels. Lone Star isn't exactly a fearless space warrior. He's more of a laid-back, slightly clueless drifter who stumbles into heroism. Barf is basically Chewbacca with a stand-up comedian's attitude. Princess Vespa goes from spoiled diva to a capable fighter, and her robot protector, Matrix, acts like a talking chastity belt with an attitude. These aren't just parodies of characters. They're reimaginings that bring humor from both the source material and the personalities they're spoofing. The middle section of the film sees our heroes crash land in the desert after a chaotic escape. This desert sequence is another deliberate nod to Star Wars, complete with a training montage where Lone Star learns to harness the power of the Schwartz, a direct send-up of the Force. Here we meet Yogurt, played by Mel Brooks himself, who serves as both a parody mentor and a mouthpiece for the film's most meta jokes. Yogurt teaches Lone Star about destiny, merchandising complete with Spaceballs, the flamethrower, and the idea that he's more important than he knows. This is where the plot, absurd as it is, quietly shifts from aimless silliness to a journey of self-discovery. The film actually gives Lone Star pseudo-prophecy and backstory, revealing that he might be royalty, and that he has a larger role to play in the galaxy than he imagined. It's goofy, yes, but it's also strangely sincere in the most ironic way. The third act builds toward a climax that's as over-the-top as the rest of the film. The Spaceballs deploy Megamaid, a giant, vacuum-wielding robot made that literally sucks the air out of Druidia's atmosphere. It's ridiculous and amazing. Lone Star infiltrates the ship, faces off against Dark Helmet in a Schwartz-Saber duel, and saves the day by exploiting the bad guy's sheer incompetence. Even the final escape, where Megamaid self-destructs, is played like a mix of a blockbuster explosion and a cartoonish gag. The story resolves with Lone Star rejecting the reward money, discovering his true identity, and winning Vespa's heart, completing his arc from drifting pilot to unlikely prince. But Spaceballs never lets the plot get too serious. Even as it moves forward in a linear, logical fashion, the film constantly interrupts itself to make fun of storytelling itself. One of the most famous sequences in the film is when Dark Helmet and his crew watch a VHS tape of Spaceballs, the movie to find out what the heroes will do next. An actual scene that breaks the fourth wall, the fifth wall, and possibly walls that don't even exist. It's not just funny, it's a hilarious takedown of the idea of suspense. The characters watch the movie they're in, pause it, rewind it, and use it as a tactical tool. This self-awareness doesn't derail the plot. It somehow strengthens it by embracing how ridiculous it all is. Another brilliant layer of the storytelling is how it uses familiar structures to subvert expectations. For example, the traditional mentor character, Yogurt, is far more interested in selling Spaceballs, the breakfast cereal, than offering wisdom. The villain, Dark Helmet, is a blend of Vader's menace and a spoiled child's tantrum. Even the emotional resolutions are presented through a filter of parody. But oddly enough, they still land. When Vespa falls for Lone Star, it actually feels earned, even though the romance is constantly mocked. When Lone Star defeats Dark Helmet, there's a real sense of victory, even though Helmet flies out into space in an escape pod shaped like a bear's head. So while Spaceballs doesn't experiment with nonlinear storytelling, or jump timelines, or offer multiple points of view, what it does do is experiment with tone and intent. It plays a straight story with a crooked smile. It treats its narrative like a playground, using it as a foundation to build joke after joke, all while following a structure so solid it could have worked even without the comedy. The key conflicts, rescue the princess, save the planet, defeat the villain, are conventional. But the execution is anything but. The emotional and thematic impact lies in the film's celebration of nonsense. It's a story about nothing that somehow manages to say a lot. It mocks heroism while secretly admiring it. It pokes fun at good versus evil while still letting good win. It's a comedy that pretends to be dumb, but is actually incredibly sharp. And through its absurdity, Spaceballs delivers a narrative that works both as a parody and as a love letter to the space adventures it spoofs. Character development. In the universe of Spaceballs, it's easy to assume the characters exist solely to serve punchlines, visual gags, and over-the-top parody. But that's exactly where the film plays its most unexpected trick. While the humor is loud, absurd, and relentless, the characters are actually built on solid narrative foundations. They parody iconic archetypes, yes, but they also follow recognizable arcs, go through transitions, some subtle, some wild, and build relationships that carry real emotional weight, even in a world where flying Winnebagos and Schwartz rings are the norm. The development may be dressed in nonsense, but it's structurally thoughtful, and that's what makes these ridiculous characters feel so genuinely satisfying to watch. Let's start with Lone Star. He's the backbone of the story. The reluctant hero, part Han Solo, part Luke Skywalker, with a dash of washed-up trucker. He begins as a drifter without direction or purpose, just looking for a way to pay off the money he owes to intergalactic mobster Pizza the Hutt. He's not noble, not brave, not particularly responsible. But as the story unfolds, he becomes more than just a guy for hire. What's fascinating is how the film gives him space, no pun intended, to slowly evolve from a man who runs from problems to one who faces them. He accepts the mission to save Princess Vespa for money, but stays involved long after he could have walked away. The turning point is his encounter with Yogurt, who offers him two things: guidance in the form of the Schwartz, and something even more important: identity. The revelation that Lone Star may be royalty, a chosen one of sorts, gives him a mythic quality hidden under all the jokes. But what really seals his development is the choices he makes. He defeats the villain not because he's stronger, but because he's wiser. He rejects the reward from the king not because he's above it, but because he's grown beyond needing it. He doesn't just get the girl. He earns the respect of everyone around him. His arc is classic hero's journey, only with more fart jokes. Barf, his co-pilot and best friend, is the film's warm center. A parody of Chewbacca and every best friend sidekick rolled into one. Barf is half man, half dog, and all heart. On the surface, he's comic relief, dropping one-liners and physical comedy at every turn. But he also plays the role of grounding Lone Star. Barf never tries to change. He's consistent, dependable, loyal, and emotionally open in a way the main hero isn't at first. His reactions to danger, his concern for Lone Star, and his affection for Vespa and Dot Matrix help humanize the journey. He's the kind of friend who never needs a redemption arc because he starts out solid and stays that way. And that provides contrast to Lone Star's internal struggle, making the duo work so well together. Princess Vespa begins as a caricature, an echo of Princess Leia with the attitude of a spoiled heiress. She refuses to marry Prince Valium. She runs away from her responsibilities, and she's far more worried about her hair than about galactic politics. But like many great characters hidden inside satire, Vespa slowly peels back her layers. She starts off haughty and dramatic, but proves herself resourceful, determined, and surprisingly tough. She adapts to desert survival, confronts the villains, and learns to trust others. Her growth is largely tied to her evolving relationship with Lone Star. What begins as mutual annoyance becomes attraction, but more importantly, mutual respect. By the end, Vespa hasn't just found love. She's found her voice, asserting herself not as a bride or a princess, but as an equal. Dot Matrix, her robotic bodyguard, is a robotic parody of C-3PO, complete with a sassy personality and internal programming designed to protect Vespa's virtue. While Dot doesn't undergo a major arc, her presence adds texture to Vespa's journey. Dot is always on alert, hilariously proper, and often exasperated, but also fiercely loyal. Her unchanging nature is part of the joke. She's a walking security system, but her small moments of bonding with the group help paint a portrait of growing camaraderie. Then there's Lord Dark Helmet, arguably one of the most entertaining villains in comedy history. He's an insecure, neurotic tyrant in a ridiculous oversized helmet, throwing tantrums, delivering lines with a nasal whine, and clinging desperately to authority he clearly can't handle. But what makes Helmet work isn't just that he's funny. It's that he's fully realized within his comic space. He believes in his mission. He desperately wants to be taken seriously. He's constantly jealous of Lone Star. His pathetic moments, like playing with dolls or losing his temper in the middle of an important plan, don't weaken him. They make him weirdly memorable. He's evil, but relatable. Every time he tries to prove himself, he reveals more of his insecurity. He has no true arc of redemption or downfall, But the comedy in his failure serves as a warped version of the villain's fall from power trope. He's not defeated with grandeur. He's humiliated, and that's precisely the payoff we expect. President Scroob, the cowardly leader of Planet Spaceball, is another fixed comic type. An incompetent authority figure who cares more about image than outcomes. His purpose isn't to grow, but to mock real-world leadership. He doesn't learn, doesn't change, and doesn't care about anything except himself. His scenes are pure satire, reflecting the idea that some people in charge are more buffoon than boss. He's the structural symbol of corruption through laziness and stupidity, and while he has no depth in the traditional sense, he adds a layer of chaos that enhances the world building. And then there's Yogurt. As the wise parody of Yoda, Yogurt doesn't just provide training and mystical advice. He provides insight into the very structure of the film. He's the mentor who teaches Lone Star how to channel the Schwartz, but more importantly, he teaches him what really matters. Character, compassion, and yes, merchandising. Yogurt doesn't grow, he enlightens. He's the catalyst for change in others. His fourth wall-breaking commentary about lunchboxes, sequels, and dolls highlights how self-aware the film is. But despite all the jokes, he gives Lone Star the clarity he needs to move forward with purpose. Even side characters are treated with care. Colonel Sanders, Dark Helmet's second-in-command, is a running gag but never static. His constant frustration and confusion make him the straight man to Helmet's chaos. Prince Valium, the perpetually yawning fiancé Vesper runs from, is a brief joke but perfectly encapsulates the idea of arranged marriage as outdated and lifeless. Pizza the Hut, the grotesque mob boss made entirely of cheese and pepperoni, is literally melting from his own toppings, and yet still manages to serve as a credible threat in Lone Star's past. The relationships between characters evolve throughout the film and shape the emotional tone. Lone Star and Barf's friendship is unwavering and grounded in loyalty. Lone Star and Vespa's relationship starts off contentious, but grows into something genuine. Even Helmet and Scroob, despite being allies, clearly irritate and undermine each other constantly, showing that evil is often self-defeating. These dynamics aren't just there for laughs. They give the film momentum, rhythm, and emotional contrast to the zany backdrop. Parody without being hollow. They exaggerate without losing purpose. And they transform, whether emotionally or situationally. Performances. What truly powers Spaceballs, beyond the Schwartz, the spaceship-sized gags, and the endless parodies, is the cast. This isn't just a collection of funny people reading funny lines. Every actor here dives headfirst into their role with total, glorious commitment. They don't just play jokes. They embody them, twist them, stretch them to the edge of absurdity, and sell every ridiculous moment like they're doing Shakespeare in a galaxy full of morons. The performances are what breathe life into the film's mayhem. Without this ensemble's total buy-in to the joke, Spaceballs could have felt like an extended skit. Instead, it becomes a fully realized, self-sustaining comic universe. Bill Pullman as Lone Star is an example of what happens when you cast a straight actor in the middle of madness. And it works. He's essentially riffing off Han Solo's rugged space outlaw and Luke Skywalker's destiny-touched nobility. But Pullman doesn't parody these characters by mocking them. He plays Lone Star straight, with just enough ironic detachment to suggest he knows he's in a satire, but not so much that he ever breaks the tone. His performance grounds the movie. Amid all the chaos, flying Winnebagos, yogurt mentors, and villainous vacuum cleaners, Lone Star remains strangely believable. Pullman gives him a scrappy charm and dry delivery that allows the audience to connect with him not just as a parody, but as an actual protagonist. And when he does play the absurdity, like during the final battle with Dark Helmet, he does it with control, knowing when to lean into the laugh and when to keep the ship steady. John Candy as Barf is pure joy in motion. With his big ears, tail wag, and a fur-covered flight suit, He's a walking punchline, but Candy never lets the costume do all the work. He gives Barf a heart. He plays him like a loyal buddy, a man's best friend type whose loyalty, enthusiasm, and hunger are all turned up to 11. Candy was a master of warmth, and it radiates in every scene. Barf's slapstick works because Candy's timing is flawless, but his real power comes in his chemistry with Pullman. They feel like real friends. They argue, joke, panic together, and pull through every scrape like brothers in arms. Candy doesn't try to steal scenes. He earns them, whether he's getting zapped by security systems or complaining about his tail being stepped on. He does it with the finesse of a comedy veteran who knows exactly how to play to the camera without overwhelming it. Daphne Zuniga as Princess Vespa is a revelation in how to play parody without losing character. Vespa begins as a perfect send-up of the space princess trope, vain, demanding, theatrical. But Zuniga doesn't reduce her to a caricature. She adds subtle layers to the performance. She plays Vespa like a woman who genuinely believes she's better than everyone else, but who slowly gets dragged into real situations that force her to become something more. Her snobbery is funny because it's delivered with total sincerity. Her emotional beats, especially the reluctant romance with Lone Star, are delivered with just the right amount of melodrama to make you care while still laughing. She has moments of comedic frustration, flashes of toughness, and even a few scenes of self-reflection that make Vespa more than just the punchline she first appears to be. And then there's Rick Moranis, who takes Dark Helmet and turns him into one of the most iconic comic villains of all time. It's not just the visual gag, the ludicrously oversized helmet, the flowing cape, the lightsaber Schwartz ring. It's the performance. Moranis doesn't just mock Darth Vader. He reinvents him as a petulant, insecure man-child in desperate need of respect. What makes it even better is that Moranis never winks. He plays Dark Helmet with absolute seriousness, which only makes every tantrum, every scream, every quiet moment of embarrassment 10 times funnier. He shifts gears between authoritarian bluster and pitiful awkwardness with precision. Watching him go from interrogating a captive to playing with action figures in the same breath is comedy gold. And Moranis makes it feel completely natural. His delivery is sharp, his physicality is expressive, and his ability to flip from villainous threat to buffoon in a single beat is unmatched. Mel Brooks takes on dual roles in the film, President Scrub and Yogurt, and in both, he proves why he's a master of comic performance. As President Scrub, he's pure corruption and idiocy, a spoof of every terrible leader rolled into one squirmy package. Brooks plays him with unashamed sleaziness, relishing every moment where Scrub lies, cheats, or runs away from responsibility. His delivery is rapid fire, his reactions exaggerated just enough to be laughable without ever derailing the scene. And as Yogurt, the wise master of the Schwartz, Brooks turns what could have been a throwaway spoof into something weirdly endearing. He gives Yogurt gravitas and goofiness at once, mixing parody wisdom with commercial greed, dropping life advice right alongside jokes about merchandising. He knows exactly how far to push a line before turning it into a meta-commentary on the film itself, and that awareness makes both roles pop off the screen. Joan Rivers, voicing Matrix, proves that you don't need to be physically present to leave a mark. Her performance is filled with razor-sharp wit, sarcasm, and that unmistakable Rivers rhythm. She gives Matrix a strict but affectionate personality, something like a robotic aunt who's had enough of everyone's nonsense. The way she delivers even throwaway lines turns into a comedic gem. Rivers brings a kind of grounded sass to the role that balances perfectly with Zuniga's uptight Vespa, and together they create a dynamic that holds its own against the film's male leads. George Weiner as Colonel Sanders is a comedy utility player throughout the film. He's the guy who's always reacting to the insanity around him, rolling his eyes at Scrub's nonsense, nervously trying to follow Dark Helmet's half-baked plans, and delivering ridiculous lines with the gravitas of a Shakespearean general. Weiner's performance is understated, but that's the key. He's the straight man in a room full of lunatics, and his ability to deliver dry humor with just a flick of the eye or a sigh of resignation makes him essential to the film's rhythm. Even brief roles, like Michael Winslow's radar technician, are memorable. Winslow turns what should be a one-joke character into a mini masterclass in comic timing, using only his voice. And Dom DeLuise, as the grotesque Pizza the Hutt, chews his way through his lines, literally and figuratively, making an unforgettable impression in just one scene. The chemistry among the entire cast is electric. Everyone feels like they're operating in the same comedic world, bouncing off one another with energy and instinct. There's no weak link, no out-of-place tone. Every actor seems to understand that the key to parody is commitment. You don't play it like a joke. You play it like it's the most important, most ridiculous thing in the universe. That's why the film works. The actors don't act like they're in a comedy. They act like they're in their universe, and it just happens to be hilarious. The performances in Spaceballs aren't just funny. They're crafted. They're layered. They're the reason the film's nonsense holds emotional weight and comic longevity. Mel Brooks' direction in Spaceballs isn't just about helming a film. It's about orchestrating a comedic universe with complete tonal control. From the very first frame, he makes it clear that the audience is not in for a traditional science fiction epic, but rather a playful deconstruction of everything sci-fi holds dear. Yet, he doesn't mock the genre from a place of ridicule. He does it from a place of admiration. Brooks loves the spectacle of space operas, the grandeur, the archetypes, the tropes, and that's exactly why his parody hits so effectively. His direction walks a fine, masterful line between satire and homage, blending the two so fluidly that the film becomes a love letter to the absurdity of genre storytelling. He sets the tone with a ridiculous amount of confidence. The legendary opening shot of the absurdly long Spaceball 1 spaceship droning across the screen is a perfect example. It doesn't just spoof Star Wars. It comments on the self-importance of big-budget space films. And he lets it go on just long enough to become awkward, then funny again. That's not just good writing. That's precision direction. Brooks paces the moment to the second, knowing exactly how long the gag needs to land, not just as a joke, but as a tone setter for everything to follow. That's a small example of a much bigger philosophy he applies across the movie. Every shot is built around punchlines. Not just verbal ones, but visual, spatial, and structural ones too. He directs comedy like a musician composes rhythm. You can feel the beat in his timing, in how a camera lingers, when it cuts, how it moves. Every moment has a comedic cadence. But Brooks doesn't rely on chaos alone. His command of story structure is often underrated. For a film that breaks the fourth wall, mocks itself in real time, and fills every scene with gags, the plot remains surprisingly coherent. He gives the audience enough traditional narrative scaffolding. Heroes on a quest, a captured princess, an evil overlord, a climactic showdown, to hold on to, even as he gleefully tears the rest down. This underlying narrative coherence isn't accidental. It's Brooks deliberately giving the audience a familiar story shape, so that they can feel comfortable getting lost in the nonsense. And that balance of absurdity and structure is what makes the film feel tight rather than messy. You never feel like it's meandering. He knows exactly when to let the movie play dumb, and when to steer it back on course. Stylistically, Brooks makes bold, confident choices that amplify the absurdity. He uses exaggerated framing to highlight characters' ridiculous costumes or expressions. Close-ups zoom in too far just to make someone's panic look funnier. Reaction shots are milked for every drop of humor. Backgrounds are staged like silent jokes waiting to be discovered. Every set, every costume, every camera angle is chosen with an understanding of its comedic value. He doesn't just parody the content of sci-fi. he parodies the very cinematic language of it. Where Star Wars used sweeping shots and majestic orchestras to heighten drama, Brooks does the same, but undercuts the drama with ludicrous dialogue or prop comedy. His compositions mimic epicness in order to make its collapse even funnier. Brooks also leverages his actors as visual elements in the direction. Rick Moranis' short stature in a massive helmet becomes a recurring physical gag that the camera knows exactly how to capture. John Candy's oversized dogtail is often used as a moving sight gag. Daphne Zuniga's exaggerated princess persona is filmed in ways that mirror Disney fairy tales before they're hilariously unraveled. Brooks knows when to zoom, when to pan, when to cut. Not just for storytelling, but to visually punch up jokes. That eye for visual humor is what sets his direction apart from mere comedic writing. The energy on set seems manic at times, but that chaos is tightly controlled. Brooks doesn't let scenes overstay their welcome. He directs with an ear for rhythm, never letting a bit go too long, never letting an emotional beat get too sappy without undercutting it, never losing momentum. The movie moves fast, but not recklessly. Transitions are quick and sharp, ensuring the audience never gets bored even if a particular gag doesn't land. The fast-paced editing, paired with zany music cues and dramatic zooms, create a sense of velocity that perfectly fits the tone he's aiming for. But perhaps the most unique quality of his direction is how openly he plays with the medium itself. This is not just a film, it's a film that knows it's a film. When characters pause the movie to consult what's going to happen next or question the logic of merchandising existing before the plot is finished, Brooks is directly toying with cinematic convention. These meta moments are hilarious because of how naturally Brooks weaves them into the story, directing them not as interruptions, but as integral features of the world. It's a world where everything is up for ridicule, including the very idea of filmmaking, and Brooks pulls it off without ever making the film feel pretentious or overly clever. His direction is accessible, even when it's breaking all the rules. And this all happens under a deliberately light, cheeky atmosphere. Brooks never lets the comedy feel mean-spirited. His jokes may be biting, but his direction is filled with warmth. He wants the audience to laugh, but he also wants them to feel like they're in on the joke. His approach invites you into the silliness, lets you enjoy it without overthinking it. That welcoming quality is baked into the film's DNA, and it comes straight from the director's chair. Brooks builds a playground where sci-fi's most iconic moments are lovingly blown to pieces, and everyone, cast, crew, and audience, is in on the fun. In Spaceballs, Mel Brooks doesn't just direct scenes. He directs tone, timing, structure, chaos, and warmth all at once. His fingerprints are on every laugh, every misdirect, every silly voice and oversized prop. He doesn't aim for realism or refinement. He aims for the laugh, and lands it, over and over again. The film's lasting appeal is a testament to his vision. A comedic universe that's both ridiculous and meticulously crafted, bursting with personality, yet never losing its direction. The cinematography of Spaceballs, guided by Nick McLean, is a sly masterclass in using visual storytelling to serve satire, while still crafting a fully realized cinematic world. What makes it fascinating is how it operates on two levels. It both honors and mocks the visual grandeur of the sci-fi epics it's spoofing. McLean doesn't phone in the job or lean on low-budget aesthetics for comedy. He approaches the camera with the same level of precision and intentionality you'd find in a serious space opera. The joke isn't that the film looks bad. The joke is that it looks too good for the ridiculous things that happen inside the frame. From the opening sequence, the cinematography is already telling a story. The extended silent tracking shot of Spaceball 1 gliding endlessly across the stars is a parody of Star Wars' iconic opening shot. But it's shot with such polish that it feels, on first glance, like it's setting up a grand tale of cosmic drama. The camera lingers without a single cut, milking the sheer absurdity of the ship's length. McLean and Mel Brooks are in perfect sync here. The joke lands not because something funny happens in the frame, but because the cinematography itself is the gag. It's the use of patience, timing, and audacious framing that makes this visual punchline hit so hard. Throughout the film, McLean uses camera angles not merely as a means to show what's happening, but as a tool to heighten comedic timing and exaggerate physical details. Consider how close-ups are used not for drama or intimacy, but to spotlight how ridiculous a character's helmet looks, how absurd their facial expressions are, or how seriously they're taking something incredibly silly. A straight-on, perfectly framed shot of Moranis as Dark Helmet adjusting his enormous headgear is funnier, because the composition mimics the gravitas of a villainous close-up in a traditional sci-fi film. The camera essentially sets up a joke that the actor walks into. There's also something wonderfully ironic about how well-lit the entire film is. McLean doesn't resort to flat lighting typical of many parodies. Instead, he borrows from the lighting schemes of epic space dramas. Deep shadows and strong light sources create atmospheric bridges, command rooms, and desert scenes. These choices are deliberate. They give the film a level of visual authenticity that makes the parody sharper. The bridge of Spaceball 1 is awash in cool metallic tones, with control panels casting angular shadows, just like you'd expect from a high-stakes intergalactic battle station. But then that mood is completely undermined by the ridiculous conversations taking place within it. The serious lighting makes the idiocy funnier. The tone is undercut not by contrast in visual style, but by the dialogue and behavior of the characters. In scenes like Yogurt's Temple, we see warm, mystical lighting that evokes reverence, ancient power, and wisdom. The golden glows bouncing off the walls and reflecting off merchandising displays are cinematic in a way that makes the surrounding stupidity, like Yogurt treating Spaceballs, the flamethrower as sacred merchandise, even more absurd. The camera respects the set as if it were part of a sacred saga. That reverence becomes a visual joke in itself. Framing plays another huge role in how Spaceballs communicates comedy. McLean frequently frames his subjects in symmetrical, almost Kubrickian compositions that parody the ultra-serious tone of the films it mimics. When Lone Star and Barf march heroically through corridors, the camera gives them the same kind of framing reserved for sci-fi heroes, but lets their physical comedy fill the space. The clean geometry of these frames often gives the comedy room to breathe. The backgrounds are deliberately left visible so sight gags, like characters sneaking across the screen or background tech doing weird things, have space to register. It's never cluttered. Every inch of the screen is used with intention. Zooms and push-ins, often considered tacky or overused in modern filmmaking, are used sparingly but to great effect in Spaceballs. The Schwartz ring moment, for example, is built up with a slowly tightening frame, giving it gravitas, until the moment bursts into silliness. The use of slow zooms helps parody moments of discovery, tension, or dramatic realization. But because the audience knows what kind of film this is, the dramatic camera language becomes funny on its own. It's a visual cue that says, something important is about to happen, while the scene delivers exactly the opposite. Even in action scenes, the cinematography refuses to play down to expectations. The desert sequences, for example, are not throwaways. They're beautifully shot, evoking the endless dunes of Lawrence of Arabia or Tatooine, with long takes and wide lenses capturing vast sunlit spaces. But then the joke crashes in. Characters literally combing the desert with a giant plastic comb. The visual grandeur is punctured by cartoon logic. McLean's work here turns the idea of cinematic beauty into a straight man for the humor. He lets the beauty land so the joke can knock it off its pedestal. Some of the best jokes are sold not by dialogue or acting, but purely through camera movement. In the instant cassette scene, where characters watch the movie within the movie, the way the camera cuts between their present selves and the playback screen, each matching angle and movement precisely, creates a layered visual joke about narrative time loops. It's not just a gag about breaking the fourth wall. It's a showcase of how the camera can be used to create surreal comedy by mirroring its own language. The technical execution here is deceptively complex. Matching eye lines, timing the cuts, syncing up the playback footage. All of that requires a tight grip on cinematographic technique. Even the battle scenes and dogfights in space, while clearly tongue-in-cheek, are filmed with a level of seriousness that allows them to parody real sci-fi tropes more effectively. The use of miniatures, motion control rigs, and composited backgrounds gives the illusion of high-budget scale. The action is blocked and lit like a real confrontation in space. But just when you're about to be impressed, the characters announce they've gone to ludicrous speed, and the visuals turn into a strobe of nonsense. McLean's cinematography gives Spaceballs an edge that elevates it from mere spoof to something that feels rich and textured. He doesn't just shoot a parody. He mirrors the visual DNA of the films it mocks, then smuggles jokes into that familiar structure. The camera never laughs at its subjects, but it helps the audience laugh at what unfolds inside those expertly crafted frames. The beauty of the film's look isn't a contrast to the comedy. It's a core part of how that comedy is delivered. Because when you make something look like a real sci-fi epic, even the dumbest moments suddenly become epic in their dumbness. And that's what makes the cinematography of Spaceballs not just funny, but genuinely brilliant. The editing and pacing of Spaceballs aren't just good. They're a masterclass in comedic rhythm, parody timing, and maintaining momentum without burning out the audience. At first glance, you might think the film is just joke after joke after joke, and while that's not wrong, what really makes all of those jokes land, and land consistently, is how the film is cut together. Behind the rapid-fire gags and zany characters is a meticulously timed structure that understands when to breathe, when to leap forward, and when to stand still just long enough to let the ridiculousness fully sink in. Editor Conrad E. Nervig approaches the film with an understanding that pacing in parody needs to walk a fine line. Move too slowly, and the comedy becomes dull or overstays its welcome. Move too quickly, and the audience doesn't have time to register the satire or absorb the punchlines. Spaceballs threads this needle with confidence, often timing its jokes to the fraction of a second. Even something as simple as a character's pause before delivering a line becomes a beat of comic tension. Think of Dark Helmet's slow realization when he watches the VHS copy of the movie they're currently in. The sequence only works because the edit gives it time to play out. It's absurd, but the payoff relies entirely on the editing giving the idea room to unravel. The film knows when to play the long game with jokes. There are scenes, like the combing the desert moment, where the humor escalates through repetition. We start with the premise. Soldiers are literally combing the desert. Then we cut to two guys with giant combs, and finally we land on a third team with a giant afro comb. The escalation only works because the edits don't rush. They roll out one absurd image at a time, giving each one space to hit, increasing the absurdity in beats. The scene could have easily been a throwaway gag in a lesser spoof, but the way it's built through editing makes it unforgettable. Even scenes that involve quick cuts or rapid dialogue exchanges are handled with care. The classic "we're at now" scene, where characters are watching the current events of the movie play out live on tape, is an editing puzzle. It's a series of reactions, cuts to the tape, reactions again, and shifts in timeline. All while characters discuss something temporally absurd. The edits serve the confusion perfectly, snapping between perspectives just enough to disorient, but never losing the audience entirely. The structure of the scene is intentionally baffling, but the clarity of the editing ensures the joke works rather than collapsing under its own cleverness. Pacing-wise, the film also manages to keep its energy high without exhausting the viewer. Mel Brooks and Nervig don't just jam scenes together. They allow for variation in tempo. For every high-speed gag-filled sequence, there's a scene that slows down just enough to let characters talk, banter, or deliver exposition. But even then, the cuts are tight. No moment lingers too long without a payoff. Even dialogue-heavy scenes, like President Scroob bumbling through bureaucratic nonsense or Yogurt giving his wisdom on merchandising, are cut with a natural bounce that keeps things lively. It's like the movie breathes, but it never dozes off. The transitions from one set piece to another are often stylized, not just in look, but in timing. The film uses wipe transitions that mimic Star Wars, but with a twist. These transitions often land with a sense of mock drama or intentional awkwardness. They signal a shift in scene, but also add a layer of visual parody that reminds the audience that this isn't just a scene change. It's a scene change that's making fun of how scene changes usually happen. It's not just the content of the scenes that's funny, but how they move from one to the next. During action sequences, especially the final showdown and escape, the pace picks up significantly, but never at the expense of clarity. You're still aware of spatial geography, still able to follow who's where and what's happening, but the cuts move quicker, mimicking the editing style of high-stakes sci-fi climaxes. This is where Spaceballs smartly uses the pacing of the very films it's spoofing to elevate its own comedy. The film mirrors the pace of something like Return of the Jedi. The quick cutting, the overlapping climaxes, the escape countdown. But instead of Ewoks and lightsabers, we get exploding megamaids and scrambled beaming devices. The editing builds that same race against time feeling, but the stakes are utterly ridiculous, and that contrast is what makes it sing. Another smart editing choice comes through the film's meta moments. When characters break the fourth wall, the cuts are sharp and intentional. These breaks are often punchlines themselves, cutting to the audience, cutting to merchandise, cutting to the actors recognizing they're in a movie. The edits don't just allow these jokes to happen. They are the jokes. For example, when Lone Star and Barf see the camera crew accidentally, the reaction shot to the crew is so sudden and perfectly timed that it becomes the punchline. Without that quick, unexpected cut, the gag wouldn't hit nearly as hard. In a movie like Spaceballs, where so much is deliberately chaotic, the editing is what keeps everything from spiraling out of control. It creates order within disorder. It knows when to hold for laughter and when to pivot to the next visual gag. It embraces the speed of screwball comedies from the golden era of film, while layering in the sci-fi pacing tricks of the blockbusters it parodies. It has to keep up with Rick Moranis' manic energy, John Candy's physical comedy, Bill Pullman's deadpan charm, and Mel Brooks' scene-stealing entrances. And it does, never missing a beat. So while the script is brilliant and the performances memorable, the editing is the secret sauce that brings it all together. It's the invisible hand that guides the chaos into coherence, that turns parody into precision, that transforms what could have been a scatterbrained spoof into a tightly woven comedy that never feels disjointed or lagging. The film moves, laughs, surprises, and entertains at a pace that feels light on its feet, like a comedy that knows just how far to stretch a joke and exactly when to cut to the next one. And that's what gives Spaceballs its timeless comic propulsion. The soundtrack and score of Spaceballs is one of the film's most delightfully underrated tools of comedy. It's not just a musical backdrop, it's a comedic partner, a sly co-conspirator in the film's grand parody of the sci-fi genre. Composer John Morris brings to this galaxy-spoofing adventure a sweeping, orchestral score that sounds as though it were lifted from the most serious and noble of space epics, only to be paired with a plot that involves characters named Dark Helmet, Pizza the Hut, and a Winnebago that flies through hyperspace. The music is sincere, even majestic, but its very sincerity is the joke. From the moment the movie begins, with the now iconic crawl followed by the seemingly endless spaceship flyby, Morris's music signals that we're entering a world that's going to take its nonsense very seriously. That extended overture isn't just background noise, it's an announcement. This film is going to sound like Star Wars, feel like Star Wars, maybe even move like Star Wars. But you're about to see it twisted inside out. The opening march has all the grandeur of a galactic empire anthem, but as the visual gag of the spaceship dragging on forever unfolds, the music becomes complicit in the absurdity. It doesn't wink or break character. It doubles down on the pomp, which makes the joke land even harder. That contrast between the highbrow symphonic score and the lowbrow, slapstick visuals continues throughout the entire film. When Dark Helmet makes his entrance, the music swells with villainous energy, ominous horns, heavy percussion, the whole Dark Lord package. It would be intimidating if he weren't dragging around a comically oversized helmet and delivering his lines like a bratty child playing dress-up. That's the beauty of the score. It takes its job completely seriously, which in turn makes the characters and the story feel even more ridiculous. There's a commitment in the score that borders on loving satire. Morris doesn't simply mock the great space opera scores of the time. He honors them. You can hear the craftsmanship in every orchestration. The sweeping strings, the soaring brass, the dramatic shifts from major to minor. All of it is meticulously crafted to sound like a genuine sci-fi epic. And yet, it's used to accompany scenes like Megamaid vacuuming up Druidia's atmosphere, or Lone Star being outwitted by a talking dog. The score is a straight-faced participant in the joke, and its refusal to break character becomes its strength. One of the most effective things Morris does is create musical themes that feel familiar, almost suspiciously so, but remain original. There are cues that echo John Williams's legendary Star Wars motifs without copying them, giving the audience that subconscious association. When Lone Star and Barf take off on their rescue mission, the music rises into a triumphant, adventurous theme that gives the illusion of danger, excitement, and heroism, despite the fact that their spaceship has mud flaps and a bumper sticker. The music makes the scene feel important, which is exactly why it's funny. It's the cinematic equivalent of playing Ode to Joy while someone eats cereal out of a boot. The score also plays with softer, more emotional tones, especially in the romantic subplot between Lone Star and Princess Vespa. There are delicate cues here, gentle melodies that swell at just the right moment, as though they belong in a dramatic love story. And weirdly, they work. The music doesn't undercut the emotion, even in a movie this silly. If anything, it heightens it to an absurd level. When Lone Star and Vespa kiss or share a longing look, the music swells just like it would in a classic Hollywood romance. It's sincere, it's warm, and in doing so, it makes the parody more charming, not more cynical. There's heart beneath the spoof, and the score knows exactly how to bring that to the surface. Let's not forget the comedic value of silence, or the moments when the music pulls back entirely. Spaceballs doesn't overuse its score. It knows when to let a moment land with awkward silence, or when to let the sound effects and deadpan delivery carry a scene. For example, many of the interactions with President Scroob or Colonel Sanders are made funnier because they're not buried under a wall of music. Their incompetence is allowed to echo, unassisted, in quiet absurdity. The absence of score in these scenes is a deliberate choice, one that enhances their awkwardness and ridiculousness. And then there's the occasional dive into 1980s pop rock territory. These musical injections place the film firmly in its era, adding a sense of nostalgic fun, while the orchestral score handles the heavy lifting of tone and parody. The pop songs bring energy and variety. It's a touch that reminds viewers they're watching a comedy grounded in its time, not just in the era it spoofs, but the era in which it was made. It's not just parodying Star Wars. It's spoofing everything from blockbuster trends to merchandising culture to glam rock space aesthetics. The meta-awareness of the film extends to the score too. One of the standout moments comes when the characters fast-forward the movie using a VHS tape of their own adventure, and we hear the music zoom ahead with them. warping and skipping in a way that mocks both narrative logic and sound design. It's a subtle joke, but it works because the audience has been conditioned to treat the music as a serious narrative guide. When it's suddenly reduced to a fast-forwarded blur, the joke is that even the score can't keep up with the film's madness. In the end, the music in Spaceballs functions on multiple levels. It's parody and homage, comedy and craft, irony and sincerity. It mimics the grandiosity of the genre while elevating the film's chaotic satire. John Morris doesn't just score a comedy. He scores an epic, and that choice is what makes it even funnier. The music invites the audience to pretend, just for a second, that what they're watching really is a serious space saga. And in that tiny gap between sound and sight, seriousness and silliness, lies the true brilliance of the Spaceballs soundtrack. Another layer to Spaceballs that often gets overlooked in the blur of gags and genre references is just how many cultural and philosophical themes it manages to sneak into the chaos. It's easy to dismiss it as a cartoonish spoof, but dig just a bit deeper and you find a film that doesn't just mock the big, bloated blockbusters of its time. It unmasks them. Underneath the surface lies a clever, sometimes cutting commentary on the way we tell stories, sell stories, and even how we relate to power, technology, and each other. Let's return for a moment to the theme of consumerism, because Spaceballs doesn't merely point at it. It obsesses over it, and in doing so, tells us something valuable about how entertainment and capitalism have fused. Merchandising. Yogurt yells, with a twinkle in his eye, but the satire bites harder the more you think about it. In the world of Spaceballs, the characters know they're in a movie. They know their image is plastered on lunchboxes and toilet paper. Brooks tears through the fourth wall to ask the viewer directly, "Isn't this what movies have become? A launch pad for products, not art?" And hilariously, this moment still hits decades later, because in today's world of cinematic universes and billion-dollar franchises, it's even more true. What's scariest is how accurate Spaceballs was in predicting just how far branding would go. Then there's power, and how it's portrayed in the film. Mel Brooks doesn't just parody galactic empires. He ridicules leadership, especially when it's empty, performative, or inherited. President Scrub, the so-called ruler of planet Spaceball, is a complete idiot, more concerned with snacks and self-image than governance. Dark Helmet is more interested in cosplay and tantrums than actually being a competent villain. These are people in charge not because of merit or strategy, but because of ego and showmanship. Sound familiar? That's part of the joke, and also part of the theme. The film is a warning, hidden in laughter. Beware of those who claim authority, but clearly have no idea what they're doing. In a world where real leadership often feels like theater, Spaceballs slices through the illusion with slapstick and sarcasm. But the film isn't all critique. It also explores personal growth, albeit in the most sideways way possible. Lone Star may start as a joke version of Han Solo, but he still undergoes a classic hero's journey. He learns to believe in himself, embraces his mysterious origins, finds love, and ultimately makes the choice to fight for something bigger than money. His arc, though steeped in comedy, is sincere. The same goes for Princess Vespa, who starts as a spoiled, reluctant damsel, but eventually finds her voice and strength. What Spaceballs does so cleverly is show us that even within the boundaries of parody, characters can have hearts. They can grow. They can make choices that matter. The film doesn't discard story. It simply reframes it with a smirk. One of the more subtle themes, oddly enough, is the absurdity of destiny. The entire concept of the Schwartz is a spoof of the Force, but it also pokes fun at the idea that some magical destiny is driving everything. Yogurt gives Lone Star a ring and some vague advice, but the film treats the idea of fate as laughable. When the time comes, Lone Star doesn't win because of some prophecy. He wins by outwitting his opponent, often through ridiculous means. This is the film's way of saying, Maybe you don't need a mystical legacy to matter. Maybe action, choice, and cleverness are more important than what the stars say about you. In its goofy way, Spaceballs deconstructs the overused chosen one trope and suggests that anyone, even a space bum with a Winnebago, can be a hero. Technology, too, comes under fire. Giant, convoluted machines malfunction, do the opposite of what they're supposed to, or break in spectacular fashion. The Mega-Made vacuum cleaner is a perfect example of technology turned farcical. This isn't just a physical gag. It's also a subtle critique of our reliance on tech, our obsession with size and power, and how innovation can be just as idiotic as it is impressive. The film doesn't preach about the dangers of machines. It laughs at how easily we assume bigger means better, or more advanced means more useful. Even language is thematically played with. The film is stuffed with puns, literal misunderstandings, and bizarre names that sound like afterthoughts. This verbal chaos serves a point. It demonstrates how words, titles, and even the way we label things, like the Schwartz or Druish princess, shape our understanding of roles and hierarchies. Mel Brooks constantly undermines language as a tool for clarity or power. Every time someone tries to sound wise or commanding, they're undercut by a joke. It's a reminder that sometimes authority is just someone talking loudly and hoping you don't notice they're making no sense. Ultimately, Spaceballs is a masterclass in hiding smart ideas beneath a blanket of silliness. It doesn't slow down to tell you what it's doing. It lets the laughter carry the message. But once you've seen it a few times, you start to notice how carefully crafted the themes are, how many satirical threads run through the jokes, and how often it's using humor not just to entertain, but to provoke a little thought. In a galaxy of serious, message-heavy science fiction films, Spaceballs stands out not just because it mocks the genre, but because it understands it deeply. It uses laughter to disarm us, then quietly says something sharp while we're busy wiping away tears of laughter. That's not just clever, it's genius in disguise. Spaceballs came out at a moment when visual effects were in a fascinating transitional period. It was the late 1980s. Digital effects were just beginning to peek over the horizon, but hadn't yet taken over the industry. So the filmmakers leaned heavily into practical effects, miniatures, and classic optical illusions, but they did so with a knowing wink and a big comedic grin. This was never a film trying to fool you into believing its space opera world was real. Instead, it wears its handcrafted, sometimes intentionally clunky effects like a badge of honor, turning what could be flaws into hilarious strengths. Right from the start, the spaceships are a perfect example of this approach. The Spaceball 1 and Eagle 5 Winnebago both look like lovingly built models, the kind you'd expect to see on a sci-fi fan's shelf rather than a $1 million Hollywood blockbuster. But that's the point. The film embraces the aesthetic of low-budget sci-fi with gusto. The models wobble just enough to remind you they're miniatures on strings or stands, and the film never tries to hide that fact. The exaggerated scale and obvious craftsmanship become part of the joke, like the movie is saying, yes, this looks goofy, and that's why it's funny. This self-awareness in the effects creates a playful, affectionate parody, rather than a slick imitation. Lighting and set design play into this too. The interiors of the ships look more like stage sets than futuristic control rooms. You can see the edges of panels, the occasional overbright spotlight, and shadows that don't quite line up. Instead of pulling you out of the story, these choices enhance the comic tone, almost inviting you backstage to see the machinery of the joke. The visual effects team seems to be in on the fun with the rest of the cast and crew, using every trick in the book to remind us we're watching a parody that loves the genre it's mocking. One of the best examples of visual effects serving comedy rather than spectacle is the Mega-Made sequence. Here, the villainous Spaceballs unleash a giant vacuum cleaner monster, a ridiculous concept brought to life with a huge inflatable prop and clever practical effects. It's deliberately over the top, and the exaggerated scale and bouncy movements make it a highlight of the film's physical humor. The absurdity of a vacuum cleaner destroying planets perfectly encapsulates the film's playful irreverence towards sci-fi conventions. Weapons and action scenes follow the same philosophy. The laser blasts and lightsaber duels don't strive for slick visual sophistication. Instead, they lean into broad theatrical gestures, sparks flying, big puffs of smoke, and exaggerated sound effects that feel like they were pulled straight from a 1950s sci-fi serial. The laser guns look chunky and almost cartoonish, perfectly matching the tone. When characters swing their lightsabers, it's as much a comedy sketch as an action sequence, with the effects timed to maximize laughs rather than thrills. Interestingly, the film's almost total reliance on practical effects gives the characters and settings a tactile, physical quality that modern CGI-heavy films often lack. Barf, the half-man, half-dog character, is a fantastic example. He's brought to life through costume and puppetry, and the tangible nature of this kind of effect makes him feel wonderfully real and delightfully absurd. The exaggerated makeup and movements turn Barf into a walking visual joke, but one that's grounded in actual physicality, which helps anchor the comedy in a relatable, human performance. There's also the clever use of simple optical tricks and camera techniques. For example, in scenes where the characters use the Schwartz, the effects are minimal but cleverly timed to comedic effect. The film's self-aware approach means it never tries to dazzle you with effects, but instead surprises you by how cleverly it uses them to support the jokes and story. The visual effects also work hand in hand with the film's meta-humor and frequent breaking of the fourth wall. Moments like the fast-forward scene, where the characters literally skip ahead in the movie, use deliberately cheap-looking effects and jump cuts that highlight the film's playful manipulation of cinematic conventions. It's a reminder that Spaceballs isn't interested in traditional immersion. It wants you to laugh at the artifice of movies themselves. In terms of compositing and layering, the film doesn't shy away from showing its work. Blue screens, visible wires, and obvious matte lines pop up throughout. But rather than detract, they add to the charm. It's like the filmmakers are saying, "Here's how we make the magic happen, but it's all just a bit silly, so relax and enjoy the ride." This transparency keeps the tone light and the audience connected to the humor, instead of caught up in spectacle. So while Spaceballs never dazzles with cutting-edge effects or seamless digital wizardry, it turns that limitation into its greatest strength. Its visual effects blend perfectly with the film's irreverent tone, using goofy, handcrafted techniques to create a universe that's as funny as it is memorable. The practical effects don't just support the story. They become part of the story's joke, making Spaceballs a loving, hilarious send-up of sci-fi cinema that continues to charm audiences decades later. The set design and locations in Spaceballs are an absolute treasure trove of comedic creativity, shaping the film's unique identity by fully embracing a campy, tongue-in-cheek aesthetic that lovingly mocks the sci-fi genre while celebrating it. Far from striving for sleek futurism or polished realism, the film dives headfirst into an intentionally exaggerated, almost toy-like world where every set piece, prop, and backdrop serves both a practical storytelling purpose and a punchline. Right from the opening moments aboard the Spaceball One, it's clear the filmmakers wanted the environment itself to be part of the joke. The ship's interior looks like a cross between a 1950s sci-fi television set and a carnival funhouse, bursting with oversized buttons, flashing panels, and random switches that seem to do everything and nothing all at once. There's a palpable charm to the somewhat haphazard construction of the control room, with visible wires, awkwardly placed gadgets, and brightly colored lights that don't necessarily align with their functions. Rather than trying to disguise these quirks, the film highlights them, inviting the audience to be in on the joke, as if saying, "Here's the secret. It's all make-believe, so just enjoy the ride." This self-aware approach instantly establishes a playful tone and sets the stage for the zaniness to come. One of the most memorable aspects of the film's production design is its brilliant use of props that are both absurd and brilliantly functional within the story. The Eagle 5 Winnebago is a prime example, transforming an everyday RV into a fully operational spaceship with sliding doors and a comically loud horn. This juxtaposition of the familiar with the fantastical not only triggers laughs, but also provides a visual shorthand for the film's irreverent style. The interior of the Winnebago is a cozy, cluttered, road trip-style space, packed with little details that make it feel lived in and real, despite its ridiculous premise. It's a perfect visual metaphor for the whole movie, mixing the mundane with the outrageous in a way that feels fresh and funny. The desert planet Druidia's barren, sandy landscape offers a perfect playground for parodying classic space westerns and sci-fi tropes. The sparse but thoughtfully arranged set pieces, from craggy rock formations to empty stretches of sand, evoke the isolation and grandeur typical of such films, but the insertion of silly signs or absurd objects keeps the tone light-hearted and satirical. The environment itself becomes a character, reflecting the film's tendency to lampoon while still showing affection for the genre's familiar settings. The villain's lair is another visual highlight, acting as a physical extension of the movie's caricatured tone. The Spaceballs headquarters is a garish, over-the-top construction that looks more like a children's playground than a menacing fortress. Its bright colors clash wildly. Oversized buttons and levers are comically exaggerated, and the overall design suggests a place where slapstick antics are not just expected but inevitable. This setting perfectly complements the bumbling villain characters and keeps the atmosphere buoyant and fun rather than dark or threatening. Costumes and makeup also blend harmoniously with the set design, contributing to the overall world building. Dark Helmet's enormous, comically oversized helmet isn't just a prop. It's a visual gag that interacts with the spaces around him, making his character feel simultaneously intimidating and ridiculous. The exaggerated, cartoonish costumes worn by both heroes and villains match the vibrant artificial environments, reinforcing the film's comic tone and immersing the audience in a world where nothing is quite what it seems. Despite primarily relying on soundstage sets and constructed environments rather than real-world locations, Spaceballs manages to create a sense of vastness and variety through clever art direction. Each planet or location feels distinct, with visual cues tailored to parody specific sci-fi genres or iconic films, from the sterile interiors of Spaceball 1 to the dusty expanses of Druidia. This variety helps maintain audience engagement by offering a rich visual palette that never feels monotonous or repetitive. Lighting plays a vital role in enhancing the visual comedy. The film opts for bright, almost gaudy lighting schemes that illuminate every colorful detail, avoiding heavy shadows or dramatic contrasts typical of more serious sci-fi. This approach emphasizes the artificiality of the environments and complements the film's upbeat, comic energy. The choice to avoid darkness and gloom keeps the atmosphere buoyant, ensuring the sets feel like vibrant playgrounds where anything goofy can happen. Attention to detail is where the production design really shines. Props are often labeled with hilarious warnings or references, buttons sport cheeky names, and everyday objects are cleverly repurposed as futuristic gadgets. These small touches reward attentive viewers with layers of humor and show a deep love for the source material even as it's being lovingly mocked. The filmmakers clearly had fun embedding visual Easter eggs and sly jokes into every nook and cranny, adding a richness that invites repeat viewings. In the end, the set design and locations in Spaceballs do far more than simply provide a backdrop. They actively contribute to the film's comedic rhythm, enhance the storytelling, and immerse the audience in a lovingly absurd universe. By embracing its limitations and leaning into deliberate exaggeration and camp, the film creates a world that's memorable, charming, and endlessly entertaining. A perfect stage for its irreverent, joyful send-up of sci-fi culture. Certainly, Here's an even more detailed and expanded take on the dialogue and script of Spaceballs, diving deeper into its nuances, comedic techniques, and how it shapes the entire film experience. The dialogue and script of Spaceballs are a masterclass in comedic writing that skillfully combines sharp satire, slapstick hilarity, and absurdist humor to create a truly unforgettable parody of the sci-fi genre. From the very first lines, it's clear the film refuses to take itself seriously, choosing instead to gleefully lampoon the conventions, tropes, and cliches that have defined space adventures for decades. But what makes the script truly exceptional is how it balances this irreverence with cleverness, crafting jokes that are both smart and silly, appealing to casual viewers and devoted sci-fi fans alike. One of the key strengths of the script lies in its impeccable timing and pacing. The dialogue zips along with a rapid-fire rhythm, with characters volleying jokes back and forth in a way that feels almost conversational, yet precisely choreographed for maximum comedic effect. Writers Mel Brooks and his team clearly have a deep understanding of how to use dialogue, not only to elicit laughs, but to develop characters and drive the story forward. The screenplay's pacing ensures there's never a dull moment. Jokes land, bounce off each other, and build on one another, creating a dense network of humor that rewards attentive audiences with layered laughs. The humor itself is wonderfully varied. It stretches from clever wordplay and punning to outright slapstick and physical comedy, often within the same scene. For instance, Dark Helmet's exaggerated pronunciation of helmet becomes a recurring gag, layered with visual humor from the oversized helmet prop. Similarly, the script uses absurd exaggeration masterfully, turning classic sci-fi lines into ridiculous soundbites that parody the grandiosity of the original works. This mixture keeps the comedy fresh and unpredictable, never letting the audience settle into any one style of joke. Character voices are another highlight of the script. Each character speaks with a distinctive tone and cadence that perfectly matches their personality and role in the parody. Lone Star's laid-back, sarcastic heroism contrasts beautifully with Princess Vespa's diva-like impatience and Dark Helmet's goofy villainy. These distinct voices help anchor the film's chaotic humor, making the characters feel like fully realized comedic archetypes rather than just punchline delivery machines. The supporting cast, from the quirky barf to the eccentric yogurt, also gets their moment to shine with memorable lines that add richness and variety to the dialogue landscape. The script's cleverness shines brightest when it leans into meta-humor and self-referential jokes. Characters openly acknowledge their roles within a parody, breaking the fourth wall and even commenting on the movie's budget or narrative decisions. This self-awareness adds a refreshing dimension, turning the film into a conversation with the audience that invites them to be in on the joke. For example, when Yogurt explains the concept of merchandising, the script pokes fun at Hollywood's commercial side with a wink, blending commentary with comedy seamlessly. Many lines from Spaceballs have become cultural touchstones thanks to the script's sharp wit and memorable phrasing. "May the Schwartz be with you" instantly signals the film's playful riff on Star Wars, capturing the essence of parody in just a few words. The hilarious ludicrous speed sequence showcases how the script uses repetition, exaggeration, and absurd visual descriptions to escalate a simple joke into a show-stopping comedic moment. These iconic lines demonstrate how the script crafts humor that transcends the film itself, embedding the movie deeply into popular culture. Beyond the overt jokes, the script is peppered with smaller, subtler moments of humor that enrich the viewing experience. Background chatter, prop labels, and offhand comments often contain witty asides or clever nods to sci-fi lore, rewarding repeat viewers with new discoveries each time. This attention to detail reveals the writer's love and respect for the genre, even as they poke fun at it. The humor here feels affectionate rather than mocking, inviting fans to laugh with the film rather than at it. In terms of emotional impact, the script cleverly weaves in moments of genuine character connection without sacrificing the comedy. The interactions between Lone Star and Princess Vespa, for example, contain a playful romantic tension that adds a layer of warmth and motivation to their antics. These emotional beats provide a subtle balance to the relentless comedy, making the characters' journeys more engaging and relatable. It's a testament to the writing that the film can simultaneously feel like a zany spoof and a fun adventure with characters you care about. The dialogue also makes excellent use of timing and silence. The script understands that a perfectly timed pause or reaction shot can elevate a line from funny to hilarious. These beats give the actors room to deliver physical comedy or facial expressions that amplify the humor beyond words. The interplay between scripted lines and spontaneous-seeming reactions creates a lively, dynamic energy that keeps the audience fully engaged. Overall, the dialogue and script of Spaceballs are the beating heart of the film's success. They fuse clever satire with broad comedy, crafting characters with distinct voices and memorable lines that stay with viewers long after the credits roll. Through rapid pacing, meta-humor, and affectionate parody, the script not only entertains but honors the sci-fi genre it lovingly spoofs, making Spaceballs a timeless comedic gem that continues to delight audiences across generations. Absolutely! Let's dive even deeper into how Spaceballs handles its genre, stretching the boundaries and redefining expectations in playful, inventive ways that make it a standout parody and a unique entry in sci-fi comedy. From the moment Spaceballs blasts off, it's clear that the film is both a loving tribute and a gleeful takedown of the space adventure genre. Unlike traditional sci-fi epics that often build worlds with intense seriousness and complex mythology, this movie embraces the ridiculous at every turn. It takes the grandiose, sometimes overblown conventions of the genre, epic battles, heroic destinies, galactic empires, and zooms in with a magnifying glass that highlights their absurdities. What could be more earnest in another film becomes a punchline here. One of the most impressive things about Spaceballs' genre execution is how it cleverly flips classic tropes on their heads without losing the essence of what makes those tropes work. The hero's journey is still there, but instead of a flawless champion, Lone Star is a laid-back, sometimes bumbling rogue whose charm comes from his imperfections and wit rather than sheer heroism. This twist adds layers to the genre's traditional storytelling, making the narrative feel both fresh and familiar. The princess is no longer just a figure to be rescued, but a self-aware diva who constantly pushes back against the damsel-in-distress stereotype, adding sass and humor that feel modern and engaging. The villainy in Spaceballs is perhaps one of the most effective parodies of genre conventions. Dark Helmet takes the archetype of the dark, brooding antagonist and cranks it into hilarious overdrive with his oversized helmet, juvenile tantrums, and ridiculous schemes. This approach not only makes the villain laughable, but also critiques the sometimes one-dimensional nature of sci-fi antagonists. The film invites viewers to laugh at these exaggerated traits while simultaneously enjoying the familiar narrative of good versus evil. Action sequences, which often serve as the heart-pounding core of many sci-fi films, are handled in a way that upends expectations. The space chases and battles here are deliberately over the top and slapstick, turning what would usually be tense, fast-paced moments into playgrounds of physical comedy and sight gags. The use of visual humor, like the infamous ludicrous speed jump, exemplifies how the film uses genre conventions as a canvas for absurd creativity rather than strict adherence. It's a reminder that even the most serious moments in sci-fi can be fertile ground for laughs when approached with a sense of fun. Beyond just poking fun at cliches, Spaceballs also embraces meta-humor that makes it a standout in genre parody. The film frequently breaks the fourth wall, addressing the audience directly or commenting on its own nature as a movie. Scenes like yogurt explaining merchandising cleverly satirize the commercialization of film franchises, revealing an insider's wink that connects with viewers on a deeper level. This self-awareness transforms the film into a kind of conversation about the genre itself, inviting the audience to laugh along not just at the story, but at the industry surrounding it. Technically, the film's blending of genre elements is seamless. It juggles sci-fi spectacle, comedic timing, character-driven moments, and even a touch of romance without ever feeling uneven. The script and direction work hand in hand to maintain a brisk pace that keeps the audience engaged, allowing the comedy and story beats to land with maximum impact. The editing ensures that jokes don't drag and that the plot progresses, striking a delicate balance between parody and narrative coherence. The production design and effects, while intentionally cheesy, serve to enhance this playful subversion of genre norms. Instead of high-end CGI or slick futuristic sets, Spaceballs opts for deliberately obvious props and costumes that highlight the film's comedic tone. This choice makes the movie feel accessible and fun, inviting viewers to enjoy the spectacle without taking it too seriously. It also nods to the way early sci-fi films had to make do with limited resources, turning those limitations into a strength by embracing camp. What makes Spaceballs truly special is its ability to maintain affection beneath its satire. Every joke, parody, and gag comes from a place of genuine love for the sci-fi genre. The filmmakers clearly know the material inside and out, and their humor feels like a celebration as much as a critique. This balance ensures the movie resonates not just as a comedy but as a homage, endearing it to both casual audiences and die-hard fans of space adventures. Ultimately, Spaceballs uses the genre as both a playground and a mirror, reflecting the quirks, excesses, and charm of sci-fi storytelling while inviting laughter at the same time. It doesn't just follow or mock genre conventions. It reinvents them through a comedic lens that is at once irreverent, insightful, and endlessly entertaining. This bold, joyful reimagining is what gives the film its lasting appeal and secures its place as a timeless classic in both parody and sci-fi cinema. Absolutely! Let's dive even deeper into how Spaceballs delivers its sharp and playful social and cultural commentary beneath all the wild humor and sci-fi parody, making it not just a laugh riot, but a surprisingly insightful film. At first glance, Spaceballs seems like a simple spoof packed with slapstick gags and silly one-liners. But lurking behind all the zaniness is a thoughtful critique of the entertainment industry's obsession with commercialism. The iconic merchandising scene where Yogurt breaks the fourth wall to talk about selling toys, lunchboxes, and action figures is more than just a funny moment. It's a razor-sharp satire of Hollywood's profit-driven machine. It reveals how often blockbuster movies become less about storytelling or artistic vision, and more about creating endless streams of merchandise to maximize revenue. By placing this commentary directly into the plot, and having a beloved character deliver it with a wink, the film cleverly exposes the money-hungry side of pop culture without ever sounding preachy or out of place. It's a meta moment that feels both hilarious and surprisingly on point decades later, making audiences think about the commercialization of the movies they love while they laugh. Beyond its take on consumerism, Spaceballs also offers a sly commentary on authority and the absurdity of power structures. Dark Helmet's comically oversized helmet and exaggerated villainous mannerisms mock how sometimes figures of authority appear ridiculous rather than imposing. This character is a caricature of the pompous, ego-driven leader archetype, highlighting how power can often be more about image and bluster than substance or real influence. The film uses humor to soften the critique, inviting viewers to laugh at such characters while subtly encouraging skepticism about the nature of leadership and authority in general. It's a playful jab at the often theatrical and self-important style of those in charge, wrapped up in absurd antics and exaggerated props. Princess Vespa's diva personality also serves as a cultural commentary on fame, entitlement, and social hierarchy. Rather than a typical helpless princess, Vespa is loud, self-centered, and demanding, an amusing exaggeration of celebrity culture and aristocratic privilege. This portrayal satirizes how status and fame can distort behavior and create exaggerated personas disconnected from everyday reality. Through Vespa, the film reflects on the cult of celebrity, poking fun at the way fame elevates some individuals to almost mythical status while often highlighting their flaws and quirks in comic relief. It's a subtle yet effective commentary on how social status influences personality and how audiences consume and mythologize famous figures. The film also gently critiques the way stories, especially in Hollywood, are constructed and packaged for mass consumption. By parodying the classic hero's journey and sci-fi cliches, Spaceballs exposes the formulaic nature of many blockbuster narratives. This self-referential humor invites viewers to think critically about the storytelling conventions they take for granted, revealing how predictable tropes and character archetypes are often recycled. The film's meta-awareness transforms it from a simple spoof into a commentary on the nature of media itself, how stories are shaped, sold, and sometimes overused. This layer of satire encourages audiences to see beyond the surface of their favorite genres and question the mechanics behind them, all while enjoying a hilarious romp through space. Importantly, the film's social commentary never feels heavy-handed or forced. Instead, it's woven seamlessly into the comedy and plot, making the messages feel like natural extensions of the humor rather than separate lectures. This subtlety is a big part of why Spaceballs has remained so beloved. It entertains fully while quietly nudging audiences to think about culture, media, and authority through the lens of absurdity. The spirit of irreverence and skepticism in Spaceballs also reflects the cultural mood of the 1980s. A time when audiences were increasingly questioning institutions, authority figures, and the growing commercialization of entertainment. The film captures this zeitgeist through its parody and humor, providing a comedic outlet for cultural critique while simultaneously celebrating the genre it mocks. It embodies a playful rebellion against taking everything seriously, encouraging viewers to laugh at the excesses of power, fame, and media culture. In sum, Spaceballs masterfully balances gut-busting comedy with sharp social and cultural insights. It uses parody not just to entertain, but to reflect on consumerism, authority, celebrity culture, and storytelling itself. By doing so with a light touch, the film becomes more than a simple spoof. It becomes a clever cultural mirror wrapped in layers of humor, satire, and affection for the genre. This unique blend of fun and thoughtfulness is what keeps Spaceballs relevant and cherished, proving that beneath the laughter, there's plenty to think about too. Absolutely. Let's delve even deeper into how Spaceballs crafts its emotional connection with audiences, turning what might seem like just a goofy spoof into an enduring cultural phenomenon that resonates far beyond simple laughter. From the very first frame, Spaceballs hooks its viewers not only through the sharpness of its satire, but by creating a playful atmosphere where everyone feels invited to join in on the joke. The film's energy is infectious. Each scene is packed with comic timing that builds a rhythm of humor and surprise, making audiences anticipate the next laugh almost like riding a wave. This ongoing emotional engagement isn't just about isolated jokes. It's about maintaining a steady flow of amusement that keeps viewers emotionally invested. Instead of a passive experience, watching Spaceballs feels like being part of a lively, ongoing conversation full of witty banter and unexpected punchlines. One key to the film's emotional power lies in its characters, who are as exaggerated as they are endearing. Lone Star, with his reluctant hero vibe and occasional cluelessness, offers a kind of everyman to root for, someone audiences can laugh with and relate to. Princess Vespa's dramatic flair and diva tendencies add a vibrant energy that both satirizes and celebrates classic princess tropes, while Dark Helmet's absurd villainy invites laughter without fear or tension, creating a safe space for fun rather than dread. This balance of caricature and charm allows viewers to emotionally connect with the characters, not through deep complexity, but through affection for their comedic personas. The result is a film where characters aren't just jokes, they're companions on a wild, hilarious journey. Moreover, Spaceballs excels at building a communal atmosphere. The humor often breaks the fourth wall, or includes meta-jokes about the film industry itself, creating a feeling that the audience and the filmmakers share a secret understanding. Moments like yogurt's merchandising, explanation, or references to well-known sci-fi franchises turn the viewing experience into a participatory event, where laughter becomes a social glue connecting everyone in the room. This shared experience is emotionally powerful because it transforms watching a movie from a solitary activity into a collective celebration of humor and pop culture. The film's rapid-fire delivery and dense layering of jokes also contribute to its emotional impact by keeping the audience continually engaged. The quick shifts from one gag to another prevent boredom and create an exhilarating pace that heightens excitement and anticipation. This momentum mirrors the emotional highs and lows of a roller coaster, with bursts of laughter followed by moments of playful absurdity. The rhythm keeps the audience emotionally energized, reinforcing the fun and light-hearted tone that defines the movie. Another factor adding emotional depth is the film's lasting replay value. Spaceballs is packed with references, puns, and visual gags that reward repeated viewings, making each watch a new discovery. This quality creates a lasting emotional bond as fans return time and again, finding comfort and joy in familiar jokes while uncovering hidden nuances. The ability to enjoy the film repeatedly speaks to its unique emotional resonance. Viewers don't just laugh once, they keep coming back, building a kind of affectionate relationship with the movie. In addition, Spaceballs sparks conversation and connection beyond the screen. Its memorable lines, iconic scenes, and clever parody inspire fans to quote and share moments with others, turning the film into a cultural touchstone. This social aspect strengthens its emotional footprint, as fans bond over their shared appreciation and inside jokes, creating a community united by laughter and nostalgia. While primarily a comedy, the film occasionally dips into moments that raise the emotional stakes just enough to enrich the experience. For example, Princess Vespa's capture and Lone Star's heroic efforts provide a mild undercurrent of adventure and stakes, adding texture without shifting the tone from comedy. These brief emotional shifts keep the story engaging on multiple levels, ensuring that the audience's feelings aren't confined solely to humor, but also include genuine investment in the character's journey. All told, Spaceballs crafts an emotional journey defined by joyful laughter, shared experiences, and affectionate parody. It creates a vibrant space where audiences can escape into absurdity, while feeling connected to the characters, the filmmakers, and each other. This unique blend of humor, heart, and cultural savvy is what makes Spaceballs not just a funny movie, but a beloved classic that continues to engage and delight audiences across generations. Certainly, let's take a deeper dive into how Spaceballs compares to other films in the parody and sci-fi comedy genre, exploring not only its unique qualities, but also the broader context that makes it such a standout. Spaceballs arrived in 1987 during a time when parody films were gaining popularity, yet it distinguished itself by focusing its entire comedic energy on the sci-fi and space opera genres, especially taking aim at the cultural giant that is Star Wars. While other parody films of the era often leaned on general slapstick or poked fun at multiple genres in a patchwork fashion, Spaceballs committed to a detailed, loving satire of space-themed blockbusters, which allowed it to develop a more coherent and engaging narrative. This laser-focused approach gave it a depth many parody films lack, letting audiences not only laugh at the jokes, but also appreciate the cleverness behind the references and the affectionate ribbing of beloved sci-fi staples. Compared to earlier parody classics from Mel Brooks, like Blazing Saddles and Young Frankenstein, Spaceballs shares the same brilliant blend of sharp wit, slapstick, and absurdity, but adapts it to a more visually ambitious setting. While those earlier films thrived on clever dialogue and character-driven humor set in recognizable earthbound genres, Spaceballs took a bolder leap by embracing the visual spectacle of sci-fi. Incorporating futuristic costumes, special effects, puppetry, the unforgettable dot matrix, and spaceship battles. This willingness to invest in production value helped it stand out visually, offering more than just verbal comedy, but an immersive parody experience that poked fun at not only story elements, but the cinematic form of the genre itself. When placed alongside other sci-fi comedies and parodies that came before and after, Spaceballs continues to shine because of its unique tone and approach. Films like Galaxy Quest, 1999, and Guardians of the Galaxy, 2014, mix humor and sci-fi, but lean more toward affectionate homage or adventure with comedic elements, rather than pure parody. Spaceballs sits comfortably in the parody camp, but balances this with a narrative that has enough heart and cohesion to engage viewers beyond just joke after joke. This ensures it remains entertaining even for viewers who might not catch every single reference, thanks to its solid comedic rhythm and memorable characters. In the realm of pure parodies, movies like Not Another Teen Movie or Scary Movie share the goal of lampooning popular genres, but often come across as gag-heavy and episodic, sometimes lacking the narrative glue that Spaceballs maintains. Mel Brooks' mastery of blending parody with storytelling means Spaceballs doesn't feel like a string of disconnected jokes, but rather a fully realized comedic universe where the characters and story arc matter as much as the punchlines. This structural strength makes it easier to watch repeatedly, with each viewing revealing new layers of humor and references. The influence of Spaceballs on popular culture is vast. It was one of the first major films to openly mock Star Wars characters and plotlines with such gusto, helping to open the floodgates for countless references in TV, film, and other media. Characters like Dark Helmet and Yogurt have become iconic archetypes within parody culture, referenced and celebrated decades after the film's release. This cultural footprint sets Spaceballs apart as not just a movie, but a landmark in the comedy genre that reshaped how sci-fi spoofs could be approached. Furthermore, Spaceballs showcases Mel Brooks' signature style, combining sharp satire with slapstick, quick pacing, and meta humor, in a way that few directors have matched. The film's self-awareness, breaking the fourth wall, and jokes about merchandising cleverly critique Hollywood itself, adding a layer of industry-savvy humor that broadens its appeal. This level of sophistication behind the silliness ensures the film can entertain a wide spectrum of viewers, from casual fans enjoying goofy humor to cinephiles appreciating clever satire. In summary, Spaceballs stands tall among its peers because it brings together focused parody, high production values, memorable characters, and smart humor in a way that few other films in the genre manage. It's not just a spoof. It's a lovingly crafted comedy that both celebrates and playfully mocks the sci-fi genre, delivering laughs while also offering a sharp commentary on Hollywood culture. Its enduring popularity and influence highlight how it redefined what a parody film could be, making it a milestone in Mel Brooks' career and in the landscape of sci-fi comedy cinema. Absolutely! Let's delve even deeper into the rich layers of symbolism, visual motifs, and thematic metaphors that Spaceballs packs beneath its uproarious comedy, exploring how these elements weave together to create a more textured and clever satire. At first glance, Spaceballs dazzles with outrageous gags and slapstick humor, but throughout the film there's a consistent, underlying critique of commercialization and the mechanics of Hollywood's blockbuster machine. The recurring joke about merchandising, characters interrupting the story to mention Spaceballs, the flamethrower, Spaceballs, the breakfast cereal, and other absurd products, serves as a razor-sharp commentary on the way studios exploit successful films by turning them into endless marketing opportunities. This self-referential humor is a meta-narrative on consumer culture that's rarely so overt in films. The film essentially mocks itself and its potential for becoming just another cog in the merchandising juggernaut, adding a layer of irony to the whole sci-fi epic experience. It's a brilliant move that not only generates laughs, but also forces viewers to reflect on the commodification of art and entertainment. Digging into character symbolism, Dark Helmet stands out as a comedic yet pointed satire of authoritarian power figures. His enormous helmet comically exaggerates the intimidation factor of villains like Darth Vader, but his clumsy antics and childish tantrums strip away any menace, revealing the absurdity behind such dark, brooding villainy. Through Dark Helmet, the film playfully undermines the gravitas that sci-fi villains often carry, suggesting that beneath the threatening facade lies insecurity and buffoonery. This subversion of the archetypal villain is a recurring theme. Spaceballs delights in poking holes in the seriousness of traditional sci-fi storytelling, reminding us not to take these grandiose narratives too seriously. The mega-made sequence is a standout example of the film's use of visual metaphor to satirize sci-fi tropes. Transforming a giant vacuum cleaner into a battle robot is both ludicrous and genius, mocking the genre's tendency to weaponize and glamorize technology. This gag plays on the idea of consumer appliances invading and dominating space warfare, which doubles as a sly jab at how everyday consumerism saturates all aspects of life, even something as epic as intergalactic battles. It's a visual gag layered with social commentary about technology's pervasive, sometimes absurd role in modern existence. Yogurt's character offers a multifaceted metaphor that blends parody, spirituality, and commercialism. As a mentor figure parodying the wise Jedi archetype, Yogurt also embodies the commercialization of mystical wisdom. His name itself is a playful nod to Yoda, but with an added absurdity that demystifies the trope. His explanations of the Schwartz blend earnest mystical talk with jokes about branding and product placement, which mock the tendency of Hollywood to package spirituality and profundity as marketable commodities. This dual role makes Yogurt more than just comic relief. He symbolizes the film's critique of how narratives of power and enlightenment can be commodified and trivialized. The film's use of visual motifs like the costumes, props, and character designs further underscores its satirical edge. Barf, the half-man, half-dog Mog, is a humorous exaggeration of the quirky alien sidekick trope, blending absurdity with endearing charm. The oversized helmet worn by Dark Helmet, the goofy robot Matrix, and the exaggeratedly menacing Spaceballs uniforms are all visual cues that signal the film's playful subversion of sci-fi conventions. These recurring visual motifs reinforce the idea that Spaceballs isn't just making fun of story elements. It's playfully deconstructing the very aesthetics and iconography that define the genre. Breaking the fourth wall is another clever storytelling device Spaceballs uses to enhance its meta-humor and thematic depth. When characters directly address the audience or comment on the fact that they're in a movie, the film blurs the line between fiction and reality. This self-awareness serves as a metaphor for how pop culture shapes and is shaped by audience expectations, and how narratives are consciously constructed for consumption. It's a way for the film to poke fun at itself and the artifice of cinema, inviting viewers into the joke and encouraging them to question the seriousness with which they normally engage with these epic tales. Even the film's playful approach to the Schwartz as a mystical force is a layered metaphor. On the surface, it's a parody of the Force from Star Wars, but it also mocks how such concepts in fantasy and sci-fi can feel arbitrary or overly convenient. By turning it into a source of comedic gimmicks, think of the Schwartz rings and the silly battle scenes. It undermines the solemnity often associated with mystical powers, inviting viewers to laugh at the genre's sometimes overblown reverence for these elements. All these layers, merchandising satire, character archetype subversion, visual gags with deeper cultural critiques, meta-narrative techniques, and playful deconstruction of genre tropes, combine to make Spaceballs a richly textured parody. It offers not only belly laughs, but also a clever commentary on storytelling, Hollywood culture, consumerism, and the sci-fi genre itself. These hidden layers invite viewers to look beyond the surface humor and appreciate the film as a sharp, multifaceted satire that remains relevant and engaging decades after its release. Certainly, let's dive even deeper into the cultural and historical context of Spaceballs, 1987, and explore its unique place in film history, its impact on genre parody, and why it remains so beloved decades later. Spaceballs arrived at a pivotal moment in cinematic history. During the late 1980s, when the sci-fi blockbuster was arguably at its peak popularity and influence. The original Star Wars trilogy had finished a few years earlier, and its impact had rippled across the industry, inspiring countless imitators, spin-offs, and expanded universes. At the same time, franchises like Star Trek were flourishing through television and movies, and films like Alien, Blade Runner, and E.T. had helped cement science fiction as a genre capable of mixing spectacle with thoughtful storytelling. However, with all this popularity came a growing sense of self-importance and, sometimes, excessive seriousness in the genre. This was the exact cultural moment that Spaceballs targeted with its irreverent humor. Director Mel Brooks, a master of parody and satire, recognized that the sci-fi craze was ripe for comedic deconstruction. But rather than simply mocking the genre from a distance, Spaceballs embraced it with affection. The film's brilliance lies in its ability to laugh with sci-fi fans rather than at them. It celebrates the passion and imagination that define the genre, while simultaneously poking fun at its cliches. Oversized helmets, convoluted plots, wise mentors, and most notably, the commercialization machine that had sprung up around these franchises. The timing of Spaceballs was perfect. It came at a time when audiences were well acquainted with the iconography and storytelling patterns of space operas. This cultural familiarity allowed the film to land its jokes with precision. It parodied not just Star Wars, but also the broader sci-fi phenomenon, from the mysterious mystical forces, the Schwartz versus the Force, to the archetypal hero's journey. The humor in Spaceballs often comes from exaggerating familiar elements to absurd extremes, which both honors and deflates the source material in a way that feels fresh and hilarious. Beyond just being a parody, Spaceballs also became a commentary on Hollywood's increasingly commercialized approach to filmmaking. The merchandising gags, characters stopping mid-scene to mention toys, cereals, and other tie-ins, reflect a growing awareness of how franchises were becoming as much about marketing as storytelling. This self-aware humor was ahead of its time, anticipating later metacomedies that would similarly critique Hollywood's profit-driven motives. Spaceballs slyly mocks the idea that no successful film is complete without a full line of merchandise, turning the commercialization itself into a running joke. Although Spaceballs wasn't the start of a franchise and didn't have sequels, it carved out a lasting place in pop culture as a cult classic. Its influence can be seen in countless later parodies and genre deconstructions, from Galaxy Quest to the Lego Movie to various online memes and references. It helped set a tone for affectionate parody that balances respect and ridicule, showing that making fun of beloved stories can be a way of celebrating them. Moreover, the film captures a snapshot of late 20th century pop culture, with its particular style of humor, practical effects, and narrative structure. Unlike today's CGI-heavy spectacles, Spaceballs uses physical comedy, costumes, puppetry, and visual gags to build its world, making it a unique artifact from an era where filmmakers relied more on tangible creativity than digital wizardry. This approach adds a tactile charm and timelessness to the film, helping it endure beyond its original release period. In summary, Spaceballs stands not just as a hilarious parody, but as a cultural milestone that cleverly dissects and honors the sci-fi genre at its height of popularity. It remains a beloved film because it speaks to fans and skeptics alike, blending humor with insight, and because it taps into a shared love of storytelling even while turning it on its head. Its place in cinematic history is secure as a witty, irreverent celebration of a genre that has shaped so much of modern entertainment. Absolutely! Let's delve even deeper into the budget, box office performance, and long-term financial and cultural impact of Spaceballs, and why these elements contribute to the film's unique legacy. When Spaceballs was greenlit in the mid-1980s, Mel Brooks and the production team had to navigate the challenge of creating a film that was ambitious enough to spoof the grandeur of blockbuster sci-fi films, yet economical enough to fit within a reasonable budget. The reported budget was around $22 million, which, for 1987, was a decent but not extravagant amount, especially when compared to the soaring budgets of films like Star Wars, Return of the Jedi, 1983, or Aliens, 1986. This budget allowed for the creation of memorable costumes, quirky sets, inventive props, and a mix of practical and visual effects that combined to form a visually distinct world. The craftsmanship and hands-on creativity in set design and practical effects gave the film a tangible feel that digital effects couldn't replicate at the time, lending authenticity and charm to the parody. Mel Brooks' experience and reputation also played a role in keeping costs under control. Known for his efficiency and clever resource management, Brooks ensured that the production balanced humor and spectacle without excessive spending. The film's effects, such as the iconic Mega-made spaceship or the inflatable Spaceballs characters, were deliberately over the top and campy, turning budget limitations into comedic assets. This approach gave the film a unique visual identity, fun, playful, and self-aware, enhancing the parody rather than detracting from it. On release, Spaceballs entered a competitive box office environment, facing off against other summer films and the tail end of the 80s blockbuster wave. It grossed approximately $38 million domestically, roughly doubling its production budget. While this was financially respectable and meant the film wasn't a flop, it didn't match the multi-hundred-million-dollar grosses of its sci-fi contemporaries. The film's niche appeal to fans of parody and sci-fi comedy meant that it was somewhat of a sleeper hit, earning steady attention rather than explosive opening weekend numbers. Marketing efforts played a significant role in shaping audience expectations. The campaign leaned heavily on the film's parody angle, targeting fans of Star Wars and general sci-fi enthusiasts who would appreciate the inside jokes and cultural references. However, it didn't have the widespread promotional blitz typical of blockbuster franchises, so it relied more on word of mouth and Brooks' name recognition to attract viewers. Over time, home video releases, TV airings, and cult fan screenings propelled Spaceballs into a beloved cult classic, where its reputation grew far beyond initial box office receipts. This delayed but enduring popularity is a key part of Spaceballs' financial and cultural legacy. The film's moderate theatrical earnings were supplemented by strong home entertainment sales and rentals, merchandise, and ongoing popularity through repeat viewings and references in pop culture. Fans embraced the film's quotable dialogue, quirky characters, and unique blend of slapstick and satire, which helped Spaceballs become a staple of 1980s comedy nostalgia. Interestingly, the film's relatively modest box office success may have contributed to its creative freedom. Without the immense financial pressure that accompanies blockbuster hits, Mel Brooks and his team could take more comedic risks and fully lean into the absurdity that defines the film's humor. This risk-taking helps Spaceballs stand out as a parody that doesn't just mimic its source material, but amplifies its quirks with playful exaggeration and clever commentary. In the grand scheme, Spaceballs exemplifies how a film's true value isn't just in its initial box office figures, but in its lasting influence, fan devotion, and ability to entertain new generations. It's a testament to how smart budgeting, creative ingenuity, and genuine affection for the genre can produce a film that endures as a cultural touchstone far beyond its original theatrical run. Its financial journey, from a respectable but not record-breaking release to an iconic cult favorite, showcases the unpredictable and often magical life cycle of beloved movies. If you want to dive into the hilarious universe of Spaceballs and experience Mel Brooks' legendary sci-fi parody in all its quirky glory, there are several ways to catch this cult classic depending on what kind of viewing experience you prefer. While it's unlikely to be playing in theaters regularly since it's a vintage film from 1987, Spaceballs lives on in the digital age through streaming platforms and digital rentals, making it easy to watch whenever the mood strikes you. For the freshest and most convenient viewing, streaming services that have classic movie libraries sometimes carry Spaceballs. So if you're subscribed to platforms known for a wide range of films, it's worth checking there. These platforms often let you stream the movie in high definition, which means you get to catch all the colorful costumes, cheesy special effects, and brilliant visual gags in sharp detail. Watching it on a decent-sized TV or home theater system amplifies the fun, as the witty dialogue and physical comedy really pop when you can see every expression and prop up close. If streaming isn't available on your usual services, don't worry. Spaceballs can usually be found for digital rental or purchase on major online stores. Renting it digitally is a great option if you just want to catch the movie once or share it with friends during a movie night. Buying it digitally also means you can watch anytime, pause to laugh at your favorite jokes, or rewind to catch a quick visual gag you might have missed. For true fans, owning a digital copy ensures you have access forever and can introduce this timeless parody to friends and family whenever you want. For those who enjoy physical media, Spaceballs has been released on DVD and Blu-ray several times, often with extra features like behind-the-scenes footage, commentary by Mel Brooks, and interviews with the cast. Watching it on Blu-ray is an especially rich experience because the higher resolution and audio quality bring out the film's production values, like the quirky sound effects and musical score, that add layers to the comedic tone. Plus, the bonus features let you peek behind the curtain to see how this zany world was created, which can make a rewatch even more rewarding. No matter how you choose to watch Spaceballs, the key to the fullest experience is setting the right mood. Gather some friends who appreciate classic comedy, dim the lights, and get ready to laugh at the film's perfectly timed jokes and ridiculous characters. The humor works best when shared, as everyone can react to lines like, "May the Schwartz be with you," or the infamous merchandising break together. And if you're watching alone, try to catch the film's subtle layers of satire and playful jabs at sci-fi culture. You'll discover new things every time. Ultimately, Spaceballs is a movie that rewards multiple viewings and can fit any viewing style. From casual streaming on a lazy afternoon to a full-on movie night event with surround sound and popcorn. Whether you stumble upon it on a streaming site, rent it for an evening, or dust off an old DVD, the important part is to settle in and enjoy Mel Brooks' wild, loving tribute to the space adventure genre.